What's up everybody, Matt Moran here for another weekly update. So there's lots of exciting news to go over here this week, but before I get into the news, I first want to mention I'll be doing my usual weekly live stream here on Sunday night at 9 p.m. Eastern time, so join if you can. It's always a fun time hanging out and talking cars with all of you. But getting into the news here this week. So first off, Ferrari has revealed the faster and lighter version of the 296 called the 296 Speciale, taken from the 458. And so the convertible version is of course called the Speciale A for Aperta. They both get sportier bumpers and a racier back end with built-in winglets that look really great. And there's a new retractable wing in the middle there. It all adds up to 20% more downforce, and then power jumps from 818 horsepower to 867 horsepower thanks to boosts to both the engine and the electric motors. So the 3-liter twin-turbo V6 gets most of the same enhancements as the Challenge race car version, including the titanium connecting rods, stronger pistons, and lighter crankshaft, as well as the same engine tuning. And these enhancements make that little V6 produce 690 horsepower on its own. The electric motor puts out more power too, up to 177 horsepower now, and it all runs through a retuned version of the 8-speed dual-clutch transmission. The suspension now gets titanium springs that are a bit stiffer and lighter, and there's adjustable Multimatic shocks from the GT3 racing version. There's a special blend of the Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2 tires wrapped around new and lighter wheels, and all these efforts combined with the lighter interior components like simpler door panels and lots of carbon fiber add up to 132 pounds of weight savings compared to the regular coupe and 110 pounds lighter for the convertible. It also appears that Ferrari has swapped some of the capacitive touch buttons on the steering wheel for real buttons again, which I'm sure many owners will be happy about, and that doesn't seem to be a change they publicized very much, but it shows that they're reversing and realizing, like many other companies, that hey, maybe a fully capacitive touch steering wheel isn't the best idea. And so Ferrari didn't say a price, but all of these will likely be over $500,000, and of course they're going to go for way more secondhand as well, but very cool to see that. Aston Martin this week has also revealed a faster and lighter version of the DBX SUV called the DBX S. And so it sits above the now regular 707 version and gives you 20 more horsepower for a total of 717 horsepower, because here in the States it's rated for 697. So that's thanks to upgraded turbos from the Valhalla is how it gets the extra 20 horsepower. And it appears the benefits are mostly at higher speeds because 0 to 60 still takes 3.1 seconds, but the run to 124 miles per hour is slightly quicker now. The transmission has been retuned as well, and the Sport and Sport Plus modes now do manual shifting faster and firmer than before, which I actually think I mentioned in my DBX 707 review that I wished it was a little more savage. And I'm sure others probably have the same complaint, but it seems like they've kind of addressed that here, which is cool. The steering ratio is also quicker, but otherwise there's no suspension changes. But again, DBX 707 did get a lot of nice enhancements just last year. And the front and rear bumpers are also redesigned, including stacked exhaust tips now, which is a really cool touch that reminds me of these, the old Lexus F models that we don't have anymore here. And the SUV can now also be about 100 pounds lighter if you select all the new lightweight option boxes, which includes 23-inch magnesium wheels, the first time they say an SUV has gotten magnesium wheels, as well as a carbon fiber roof option, which they also say is the largest piece of carbon fiber that Aston Martin's ever made. And there's various other carbon pieces and even a slightly lighter grille with a pattern from the DBS 770 Ultimate. With all the likely very expensive enhancements, the curb weight is now 4,846 pounds. But I think making these things optional was smart because, I feel like DBX buyers usually aren't all blank check buyers, and I feel like most people buying a nearly 5,000 pound SUV don't care if it's 100 pounds lighter, especially if it comes at a super high cost. I mean, like that giant piece of carbon fiber cannot be cheap. Magnesium wheels cannot be cheap. I'm sure it'll be a nice option for the few people that really want to, go crazy, but I think to make sure that they retain the appeal of DBX, keeping that stuff optional, I think makes a lot of sense there. And so there's no pricing yet, but these will begin arriving to customers this fall, they say. So great to see that. Honda has also slightly tweaked the CR-V for the 2026 model year, along with adding a new TrailSport trim here, which only comes with the hybrid powertrain and makes it the first hybrid TrailSport that they've ever done. And so the formula is about the same as the others, with unique wheels on Continental all-terrain tires, a slightly more rugged look, and orange accents. And all hybrids also get an enhancement to the all-wheel drive system that Honda says simulates having a locking diff, where the vehicle can adjust torque output and braking to make sure the wheels on both sides sides aren't spinning at, vastly different speeds. So it, kind of, again, simulates that. Probably won't be perfect. We'll see, when like TFL and others, do some testing on it there. But, hopefully it'll at least be an improvement. And the other changes for the rest of the CR-V lineup here are that the 9-inch screen with its wireless Apple CarPlay and wireless Android Auto is now a standard screen, ditching the smaller screen with its wired smartphone connection that was previously standard there. And the Sport Touring trim also gets the Google built-in system like other top trim Hondas do. But that likely means it probably won't have Sirius XM anymore, because that's the way it's been for the new top trim of the Civic. The new top trim of the Accord was the first to introduce that, where Google built in for some reason, even though other brands can have Google built in and Sirius, for some reason in Honda, those two things are mutually exclusive. So if you want SiriusXM, you're going to have to run an app, through your smartphone connection there, or maybe one through the Play Store, and have, your satellite radio that way. So you're just going to have to be dependent on an internet connection. But, that's going to be the workaround there. Don't know why they keep doing that. Maybe they haven't for this one. We'll have to wait until I can get one to review. But anyway... Yeah. Otherwise, though, they do say that everything from EXL and higher now gets the fully digital 10.2-inch gauge cluster, which is something, again, we've seen in Civics and many other vehicles, and so good to see that finally in here as well. Just thankfully is finally bringing the CR-V up to speed with Civic and, the rest of the lineup here, which is good. So there's no pricing for these updated CR-Vs yet, but it'll be a quick rollout here, with Honda saying they'll begin arriving at dealers this spring. And we're already into May, so that means they must be arriving at dealers any day now. And so yeah, a really nice little improvement there. And again, they haven't really changed anything on the outside, so anyone that bought a 25 or earlier doesn't have to feel like they're missing out. And hopefully that'll kind of preserve those resale values and stuff as well. So anyway, great to see that. And the next generation of the Alfa Romeo Stelvio got an early reveal here this week, before its official reveal sometime later this year, thanks to some trademark images that we got here this week. So not the way Alfa would like to debut this vehicle, but it's out there now. And so let me know what you think about the design in the comments there. But I think it's actually pretty striking. At first, I was like, but now seeing it a couple days later again, I think it actually looks pretty good. I'm sure more flattering images will make it look even better, but it reminds me of, like, especially the front end, those slender headlights you used to have on the old Alphas from like the 80s and 90s. I think it kind of, reminds me of those. And honestly, with the way it's combined with the grille, it almost, for some reason, reminds me of a Saab. I don't know. To me, that's a good thing. I don't know if anyone else sees that or if it's just me, but I think it actually looks pretty good, especially up front there. And the lack of exhaust tips in the back there suggests this is the electric version we're looking at. That was the plan, I believe, was to launch with the EV, but they did say and confirm that gas versions will also be coming. That's one of the nice things about the platform this is on, the STLA Large platform, is you can, of course, swap, like we were seeing with Charger EV and others, and so that'll be the case here as well. And it does certainly look bigger because of it being, again, on that larger platform here, and also it should be better for usability and all that as well. So, and also, I think it's a fairly safe assumption that Giulia is going to have a pretty similar front end, just kind of shrunken down a little bit and adapted for, a lower sedan body. But, just be prepared. That might be also the face of the new Giulia, or very close to it, considering how much Stelvio and Giulia shared in the last generation here. So, yeah, we don't know when Stelvio is going to be debuting here, but again, it's assumed sometime this year, and we'll just have to wait and see. But maybe Alfa will more quickly put out, a few official images just to squash this so that people don't get the wrong idea based off some crappy, trademark images here. But cool to get the preview here nonetheless. Moving on here, the head of BMW's new class program talked with Top Gear this week about the next generation of the M3 here. And so he claimed it will be the best M car ever dynamically, which is no surprise. I mean, that's pretty typical of any, company employee to say, this is the best thing ever. But also interesting, he added that we're also going to offer the M3 with a new type of 6-cylinder engine. Now, it's been confirmed for a long time there's going to be a gas M3 and an electric one, just how there's going to be a new class 3 Series. They'll probably be called i3 and bring that name back for the electric ones, and then have the 3 Series gas-powered one, on the same platform, same kind of styling, just like we see with 5 Series, 7 Series, all these others, very interchangeable. So, that's not anything new, but the idea of a new gas engine, a new 6-cylinder, is a little bit of a surprise. So he said, because we understand it may be early for some committed M fans to make the switch to EVs, is why they're doing the engine, but we are convinced the fully electric M3 is going to hit new heights and reach new target groups because it'll behave completely differently. And BMW has also already teased that electric M3 and also its Heart of Joy computer that they say is going to process info 10 times faster for exceptional precision while driving. And that was shown off with that vision driving experience concept we saw not too long ago. But as far as that gas version, getting back to that, some are thinking it'll be electrified and that's enough to call it a new engine. If it's that engine combined with a plug-in hybrid setup, maybe even the same plug-in hybrid setup we get from the M5, instead of it being paired to the V8 like it is in the M5, it's paired to the 6-cylinder and the M3. That gives you an appropriate, notch down in power compared to M5, but the same kind of electrification boost. Maybe that'll be the way they go. Maybe it'll be a mild hybrid thing and just a little bit more there. Or maybe it is truly a new generation. It's not going to be an S58 motor. Maybe it'll be, some new thing that is, completely different. We'll have to wait and see. I'm not sure. Let me know what you think as far as what you would prefer in the comments below. I'm sure most people would probably rather not have a plug-in hybrid setup, but that seems to be the way they're going with these performance M's going forward. So that would be my bet, but very curious to see how that all plays out. And as far as when we'll find out, it's going to be a while, I think, because the regular 3 Series is going to come after the new iX3, which that, or whatever they're going to call the new class SUV thing, that I think they said is coming in September. And they said this is shortly thereafter. For the regular 3 Series, we're talking maybe October. And then, you give it another year or so typically for the M's to come out. It might be, late 2026 or even 2027 before we actually see and know all the details about a new M3, especially, gas and EV versions. So we'll see. But also, along the same 3 Series lines here, Autocar also got a strong hint from BMW's design boss recently that a wagon version is coming. It's already in Europe, but there's a possibility that it could actually come to the States. And we've been hearing about this little by little. But the BMW designer here said, I think the Touring is making a comeback. And of course, we've propelled it with the M3 Touring and M5 Touring. They seem to be very popular, even in countries where Tourings or estates are traditionally not very popular. So yes, there is new wind in that segment, and we're very happy about that. And I'm very happy about it as well. Of course, they can't pass up the opportunity to credit themselves. I mean, credit is due, but to point out we did this partially. But, I think the fact that they're talking about these Tourings, and this was in discussions about this 3 Series. Basically, Autocar came away from this saying they're going to make a wagon version of the 3 Series. And again, they did it. They already have it in Europe. We had it in the States, for previous generations, and that's just something that dropped out here for the newer generations. But, if M5 Touring is doing well, they said already in the past, I talked about this a few weeks ago, that if M5 Touring did well in the States, then that could bring us the next generation of the M3 Touring. And M5 Touring, according to BMW, is doing fantastically well in sales. They've had to increase production of them and everything else and increase the mix of wagons. So it's now like a 50-50 mix of that and sedan. So all signs point to us getting M3 Touring here for the next generation in the States. So that's, I wouldn't say it's a sure bet, but it's, most likely happening. Now, will they bring the regular 3 Series wagons here to the States? I don't know. That's going to be, I think, the bigger unknown. And the more uncharted territory. We know that enthusiasts are excited about wagons, but is the regular person, they're talking about M products here, so I still wouldn't hold your breath for a regular 3 Series or even like an M340i wagon or anything. But we'll have to wait and see. But I'm glad that they're seeing that there's some extra excitement and some new excitement for wagons. Hopefully that trend continues. I'd love to see it myself. And, we'll see. And, anyway, moving on here. Porsche has also teased what seems to be a street-legal version of the LeMans 963 race car in a short YouTube video showing off the vintage 917 that was converted to street use 50 years ago, with Porsche saying here that as its descendant enjoys success on the track today, the spirit and desire within Porsche that allowed the creation of a 917 for the road all that time ago remains very much alive 5 decades on, prompting the question, what if? So it's pretty clear that at least a concept of this is going to be shown. I'm sure there's a bunch of, billionaire collectors already lined up, probably already have deposits in for whatever this is with a blank check, ready to go. So, I think it's fairly likely if they have the technical capabilities to actually build this, and it seems like they do, because why would they be bringing this up if they didn't? It sounds like that's something. I doubt it'll be a one-off either. It'll probably be a very limited run. Maybe it'll be like 10. Maybe it'll be 50. I don't know. We'll see what they end up doing. But they say that's coming in June here for its reveal. So exciting to see that on the horizon, and a nice little curveball. I think a lot of people were hoping for a new Porsche hypercar. There's the Mission X that was shown off as an electric hypercar, but they might be rethinking that now with, again, the kind of the struggle that Rimac's having with selling Navaras these days and stuff. Maybe Porsche won't be rushing to do an electric hypercar. Maybe they will try and do one last gas thing, but in the meantime, this is a great stopgap for those very wealthy collectors, and hopefully at least a few of them actually drive it on the streets. But it's very cool to see that. But it seems like not all is well at Porsche, and it's not all rosy there, with especially in China. They're really struggling with sales there nosediving 42% so far this year, after a decline of 28% overall last year. And it's no surprise, especially in China, considering how crazy fast that evolution is of all these Chinese brands and their technology, and the low price tags, all the other crazy stuff here. More power for less money, charging speeds. I even covered a few weeks ago, BYD revealed a 1 megawatt fast charger, and their regular cars that'll be able to do that. Not insane hypercars, but stuff that'll be I think like regular, relatively affordable, $50,000-$60,000 stuff, be able to do 1 megawatt charging. And I even said, when I was covering that story a few weeks ago, like, it embarrasses all the other, Western brands here of, how can a Porsche compete if it, costs double the money with less performance, a quarter of the charge speed, way less range, all this stuff. It's like, how do you compete with that anymore? It's gotten to be such a gigantic gap. And the Chinese just have such a huge lead on the EVs here, that it seems, kind of crazy for anyone to buy any brand outside of a Chinese brand, considering how far ahead they are if you're in China there. And so, Porsche seems to agree with the idea that, people aren't going to pay this premium anymore just for the Porsche badge and having worse technology. And because of them and basically everyone else, falling behind competition so quickly, Porsche CEO told Automotive News last week at the Shanghai Auto Show that we will see in the next 2 to 3 years whether Porsche exists as an electric brand here, which is a hugely loaded one sentence here. And honestly, kind of a shocking amount of transparency from them that, they're talking about leaving, at least the Chinese, or the electric vehicles, leaving the Chinese market completely. Obviously, I think saying the electric stuff clearly suggests that they'll still sell 911s and gas-powered stuff, because they do still have an engineering edge there, and no one else can make a knockoff 911 that's, gas power that's going to be the same. And I think Porsche realizes that's probably all that they've got, since they've already lost the EV, competition here. And as has everyone else. It's not just Porsche. It's literally anyone else that's not a Chinese brand. So, yeah, that's wild, though, to hear from, again, the CEO of Porsche. I can't blame them, obviously. Like I said, I was suggesting why would people do this, weeks ago. And also, we see this from other brands. Most of the other brands that aren't Chinese brands, I just covered, recently, Mazda has a partnership where it's just a Chinese thing underneath, but it's got the Mazda styling, and, fills the dealers in China there with stuff that is competitive, because it is, again, using those domestic platforms for Chinese, buyers. And that's, I think, everyone's kind of realized that they can't beat and they can't compete, honestly. So your best chance of success is, putting your own body on someone else's skateboard platform, using their technology, and really just doing a more advanced version of badge engineering. And, I think Porsche would never degrade their brand to that. I think, that's something that they'd rather just leave than, make something with a Porsche badge that isn't a Porsche product, So I think that's why they're like, okay, we'll just leave, because they're not going to make them cheaper and degrade the brand that way. They're not going to dilute it in any other way. And so it's just, the only other option is just to stop, And so that is pretty wild. And, they said, they'll have another 2 to 3 years here to see how things go. But, I don't think anyone expects this trend to change. it's just going to probably get worse for them and get to a point where they got to pull the plug because they can't, keep on trying and just failing, and I think it's going to hurt all these brands. I mean, all of them are losing a ton of market share in China really quickly because of, again, just how everyone has fallen behind. And, it's just, it's going to be bad for all these brands because they used to really rely on a lot of those sales in China, and now that's not going to be a thing anymore. So they're going to have to do it without Chinese buyers, unfortunately. But that's the way the cookie crumbles with how the progress has gone here. So anyway, crazy to see that. And speaking of other advanced electric vehicles, Mercedes is still trying to do it on their own here. They're getting ready to reveal their new electric AMG sedan that does have some pretty advanced tech, and we get to see our first teaser image of the car without camo here, and it looks very curvy, even more so than the Vision AMG concept that was supposed to preview this car. And the production model will debut in June and will be replacing the AMG GT 4-door, and it'll use the AMG EA platform. That's the new platform they're working on, with lightweight axial flux motors that'll combine to do about 1,000 horsepower while being, I think they said, about half the size of a regular electric motor. And I believe it's still going to use like a next generation battery, but it's nothing super wild. We do know Mercedes does have a solid state battery and I think it's in an EQS, and they are the first company, I believe, outside of maybe the Chinese, to have a solid state battery in a car driving around, even if it is just a prototype. So I'd say Mercedes is the closest, honestly, in some of these key technologies of, trying to keep up with the Chinese. But we'll see about this new AMG sedan and how that, competes, but hopefully it's at least a little bit closer to closing that gap than everything else that's out there currently. But yes, we'll see more of that here in June. But speaking of the platform sharing I was talking about earlier with the Chinese, Volkswagen's head of sales and marketing in Europe told Auto Express this week that the partnership between Volkswagen and Ford that produced the Explorer EV and Capri in Europe, using that Volkswagen ID4 and ID5 platform, has been, according to him, very, very, very successful. She's really emphasizing the very there. Makes me think he's trying to drive the point home a little too hard, and I'll talk about that in a second. But as a result, he says, we do not want to rule out that there are future opportunities here to share technology again. So apparently he's very pleased with how this all has went, and so as a result, saying that there's a good chance they're going to do more of these types of things. And because of this, Auto Express suggests that the Fiesta could return to Europe, possibly using the underpinnings of the new MEB platform, the MEB entry platform, be specific here, that'll be used for Volkswagen's ID2 and ID1. And so there's other possibilities too, in my opinion, just kind of spitballing on my own here, that, since the gas Focus is going away by the end of this year, and Focus is obviously a very beloved, brand in Europe still, I think, bring back, if you have ID1 be Fiesta, ID2 be Focus, I think, that could, there's room for both of those, just like there has been for decades. So I think that's, a possibility. But even if you think outside of the small stuff, even Volkswagen has the ID7 sedan that was unfortunately, they delayed it until it eventually just got killed for the US market, but that is still on sale in Europe. And that could be a good platform for a new Mondeo, because, I think maybe Ford's regretting getting rid of the Mondeo, which is our Fusion here in the States. And so maybe you kind of bring back Mondeo by using ID7 and, kind of get back to an electric version, at least, of your old lineup. Now, whether, people are going to go for that, whenever, again, the gas ones were very popular right up until the end here, we'll see. But at least they would have replacements for those segments, which unfortunately right now they just really don't have. So we'll see, but I mean, it is surprising to hear them say that it's been very, very, very successful, considering the Capri reception was pretty cold. It was so cold last year that it launched in September of 2024, and only a few months later, before the end of 2024, they already had to scale back production and slow down production, which is not a good sign. Early adopters are going to be your best, boost of sales, and that's usually, again, right in the beginning there. Everyone that's excited about it runs out and buys it. And, that's usually the way things go. You don't scale back production until much later. And the fact that they basically scaled it back almost immediately after launching, is not a good sign. And I think seems to suggest that these aren't hot sellers. So where he's getting the idea, these are very, very, very successful. Again, they're the executives. I'm not. I don't have the data. But, I don't know if that's just marketing speak or if they actually truly believe that it has been a huge success and what their definition of very, very, very successful is. But it just seems kind of incompatible with the facts. But, anyway, it'll be interesting to see. And, I mean, obviously it'd be great to see Ford do their own engineered, thing with the Fiesta and Focus and all this. But if it's the option of either nothing or Volkswagen stuff. I mean, the ID1 and ID2, I'm really excited for those little Volkswagens. Unfortunately, we probably won't get either of them here in the States. But I think it'd be really cool to, see those, at least for those in Europe that appreciate small little hatchbacks in decent numbers. Hopefully, they do make a return. So we'll have to see, but very interesting to hear that. And we have a couple of updates to the tariff situation this week. I'm exhausted trying to follow all this stuff, but it's important, so we got to talk about it. So first off, Trump has slightly reduced auto tariffs this week, but the 25% tariff is still in effect. I think some people got confused whenever everything else for the rest of the world kind of got lowered. They thought that included cars. It did not. Cars are still at 25% for all imported cars, and that, even with these revisions, remains. And that is still a gigantic problem on its own. You'll hear a whole lot of people, very much carefully wording their statements, trying to make this sound better than it is. But we still have a 25% tariff. That's still a gigantic problem, and very little has been done to relieve that situation still. But here is what has changed. So the stacking of the tariffs that, Wall Street Journal did a very good job documenting, how like a piston for a Silverado goes back and forth across the border 8 times before it's finally in a vehicle and finally, in a car and delivered and then shipped down to America and all that. And so that stacking of tariffs isn't happening anymore. Possibly because it would be a logistical nightmare to try and track all those crossings for every individual component. And so, I think that's also a self-serving thing. Yes, it is a break potentially financially, but it's also just like that would be an enormous amount of work to try and keep up with. And so I think, it's probably just a practicality thing that they finally came to grips with. And so there won't be multiple tariffs on parts. So there still will be a tariff, but not, multiple 25% tariffs every time it goes across the border. And so they'll just get tariffed once. And then according to my understanding, this has gotten so confusing. I'm not 100% certain about this, but from everything I've researched and seen, it seems that certain parts also won't be tariffed at all, like steel and aluminum whenever they come through. So some parts will be exempted, and then the auto parts tariff, though, that was supposed to start on May 3rd will still be happening for other parts. But now those parts also get a small percentage of that reimbursed, and so the car companies have to apply for the reimbursement. So they have to pay the tariffs up front and then wait for the government to reimburse them, which might be wishful thinking as well, but that's going to be the way they're planning this. And the reimbursement amount is a measly 3.75% of the car's value in the first year. All of the parts that are all going to be tariffed and the car itself being tariffed, and then they're getting a 3.75% reimbursement on the value of the vehicle. Again, I think this is also if certain parts qualify. I don't think it's going to be for everybody, and it's not going to be for every part, but some of that stuff can get reimbursed, and that's just for the first year. The second year, that drops down to a 2.5% reimbursement of the car's value there, and then it'll be gone after year 2. So anyone arguing still that this is all just BS and Trump's just negotiating in order to, make a deal, this is all structured to very much be permanent. And they wouldn't be going through all these little tweaks to the whole, law of these tariffs if it was just some bluster that they was doing just to, that was going to be dropped tomorrow. It sounds very much like this is the way things are going to be until 2029 and maybe even beyond. We'll see. But, it seems very much like this is not a negotiating tactic anymore. This is what's happening. And yes, he gave them a little bit of a reprieve here, realizing that, again, they were going to get crushed. This isn't going to help much. So, again, this is not the win that everyone's on certain sides are trying to paint this as. But, of course, the CEOs of Ford, GM, and Stellantis put out very grateful and carefully worded statements here that were very flattering, with Ford even taking the opportunity themselves to brag that if every company that sells vehicles in the U.S. matched Ford's American manufacturing ratio, 4 million more vehicles would be assembled in America each year. The US would see a windfall of new assembly and supplier factories and hundreds of thousands of new jobs. And of course, that leaves out the gigantic problem of finding hundreds of thousands of people that want to work in factories, especially with unemployment rates still being fairly low. So finding all those people to work, and then also appealing to those people with high enough wages that they actually do want to come work for you, and those higher wages not driving up the price of cars a bunch. Like, there's a reason why all these things happen. Ford knows this, but it seems like they're just joining in with the unrealistic fantasizing that, again, is what certain people like to hear right now. And so that is the way that they're playing it. And, it's a big difference from what Jim Farley was saying just a few weeks ago, a couple of months ago, about saying how disastrous tariffs were going to be. And now everyone's saying we're very grateful for this 3.75% reimbursement partially on some parts. Like, what a tiny little contribution and assistance there. And the truth of the reality of the tariffs, even with these minor adjustments, came out a couple of days later on GM's first quarter financial call, which is actually delayed so that they could factor in all the changes of this tweak to the tariff. So this is even with this reprieve, so to speak, their GM CEO said to expect losses of $4 to $5 billion this year due to the tariffs, just because of the tariffs. We're not talking about other losses or other things, just $4 to $5 billion because of tariffs that GM's going to lose if they stay at this current level, with $2 billion coming from the imports of stuff like the tracks, which is coming from South Korea, and they sold 200,000 tracks last year. So, I mean, paying a 25% tariff on 200,000 cars, and another $2 billion will be coming from the imports from Mexico and Canada as far as the losses. And so these losses also, they're going to be incurring because they're being like Hyundai, where they actually committed, and I commend them for this, they committed to not raising prices. Now, they didn't say forever. They just said, we're not raising prices now, or for right now. So, I think they're seeing, again, Hyundai is committed to, current pricing until, I think, June. Ford has extended their employee pricing until the beginning of July. So there's these little exemptions and, extensions for this pricing, but these are not going to be sticking around if they actually want to be profitable. These are not sustainable. You can't absorb this forever. It might be a mix. I know Aston Martin actually this week said they're going to pass some of the tariff costs on to, the consumer, and they will also absorb some of it as well. So I think most companies will end up being a mix. They probably won't pass on the entire 25%, but, some of these companies aren't going to be able to afford to suck this up. GM is gigantic. They can withstand a few billion in losses temporarily, and so can many others. But, the more struggling car companies, not so much. So, again, we will see how this all plays out. But, still is a disaster. Still is a giant cluster. And no matter how much fluffing you hear from the CEOs, they're all still not happy about this. No one's happy about losing billions of dollars. So that's all just posturing, again, to get favorable treatment, hopefully in the future. But I wouldn't hold their breath for that either. But anyway, lastly, I want to thank all of you that are members of the Maran Motoring Club. So we did have a bunch of new members that were able to join during last week's live stream, thanks to the very generous membership gifting done during the last live stream here by Lanswath, and also by Dom Farrell, who also, he gifted 20 memberships. Super generous, a huge contribution. I really appreciate that, Dom, and Lanswath as well for always every week having the support there with the gifted memberships. I really appreciate all that. So huge thanks to both of you, and because of all their generosity here, I want to welcome all the other new members able to join here for the first time, including Nick Dosher, Dylan H, Luke, John, Kevin Buckley, Kavandra Knight, King Jadix, and Cynthia Endo. So I hope you're all enjoying the membership perks so far. Be sure to join in on Sunday's live stream, where members always do get that priority answering, and also have all the other perks that come with being a member. So definitely check all those out there on the membership page. And for anyone else that like all those membership perks as well as that priority answering, there's always join buttons here on the video page, on the channel page, and a link in the description. But anyway, thank you all very much for watching. Let me know your thoughts on all this stuff in the comments below. Please leave a like and subscribe to keep these videos coming, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.